Hello again. I've got a short Saradigm video for you this time around, and this is really important to me, and I'm going to explain. Sometimes you hear communication is the key to all relationships, or communication is where we're having problems lately, and honestly, it's like pretty true most of the time, but no one really stops to tell you how to communicate better, and that's why saying, oh, communication is the key, like just saying that doesn't fix anything, and it bothers me. So I figured I would give you a short video just with a few tips, not all of them, but a few that have made a huge difference with my husband and I. Hopefully that'll help, because you might say, oh yeah, communication is the key, but how do you make that key turn? That's really what we want. We don't want to just hear that communication is really important. We want to know how to make that important thing even better and stronger. So here are just 3 things that could help you if you're having a lot of issues when you're talking with each other. And I will say one thing, that talking isn't just the only way to communicate, but it's mainly where our fights arise. Fights will happen, and it's a myth to believe otherwise, but I'll even share some examples of it in my marriage with my husband. So let me just share the first one, which is set a time to communicate. Sometimes things will come up on the fly, and yes, you can talk about it right then, but if someone says, you know what, I need to process this, or it's a lot of information and it's going to be there's not enough time maybe, or it's not appropriate setting to hash things out, tell each other, okay, can we discuss this in an hour or tomorrow or in a week, or whenever it might be appropriate. Like a big decision like maybe moving or something could mean you wait a few days. But if it's something like you just need to be on your own and not in a group setting, you might wait an hour. So you have to communicate that, especially if you're the one who needs to process it and needs time. For my husband and I'm the one who wants to deal with it right now, even if it's not appropriate. It'll hang over me, and all I'll think about is this unresolved issue, while he needs time, basically every time, to think about what to say. Is it even worth talking about? Which bothers me sometimes, because I feel like they're always worth bringing up and talking about. And that's just how we are wired. And honestly, it'd be probably really bad if we were both one way or the other. So I'm glad we're both like this. But it means you have to communicate, there's that word, about when to communicate about an important issue. And this doesn't necessarily apply when it comes to making a grocery list and when to run an errand or something, but big things, make sure you communicate when. And if you don't agree about when, like if one says, you know what, we should probably address that sooner than what you just mentioned, then try to compromise. There's a lot of compromise in marriage, and that's not a bad thing. And I'll share an example. It's not really specific, but it happens a lot. A lot of my issues with my husband in our communicating tends to happen later at night. Maybe we haven't had a lot of time with each other, and maybe one of us didn't get to eat that day because my husband tends to not eat enough when I'm not around, and maybe we both had stressful days at work, so all of that's playing against something, and now we're having some issue, big or small, and it feels big at the time, and maybe I want to deal with it, but it's 10:30 at night and he has to wake up at 5 in the morning. He may not want to talk about it right now, so I can let him sleep on it. And you know what? We have this hang up about Ephesians 4:26 that says, don't let the sun go down on your anger. And we've made that to mean literally, once the sun is set, you can't go to sleep until it has been resolved. But that's not what Paul was meaning when he wrote it. Maybe, and for him and I, we try to resolve things before we go to sleep. That's just kind of our rule. But it does not mean you have to do it that way. He really was trying. It actually means the opposite of what we think it means. It means if you're in a raw situation and an issue has been brought up, doesn't matter the time of day. If it's too much at the moment, you have to take time to think about it, process it, pray about it, figure out how you're going to discuss it. And it does involve setting a time, even if it's the next day when the sun has risen again, and then resolve the issue. It does not mean hurry up and finish it before the sunset. That's not what it means. It can for you, for my husband and I, it kind of does, but it doesn't have to be. So don't get hung up on that unless it works for you. That's the longest I'm going to spend on any of these tips, but that's one of the most important ones. Number 2 is listen to understand and not to respond. Again, this is an issue for me because my husband has been hurt many times that I've interrupted him. I will say that 90% of the time, I know what he's going to say, and I'm so excited as the extrovert to talk to him about something that means a lot to him, so I'm talking before he finishes his sentences. But there is that 10% that he may be going a different direction, and I've just interrupted his thought, and he may forget it, or he just feels like his words aren't important enough to listen to. That's what he hears when I interrupt. It's not my intention, but it's how he feels, and what he feels matters to me, so I have to train myself a lot not to interrupt and not even to think about what I'm going to say before he's done. I have to look at him and listen with my ears and eyes and literally not even think about what I'm going to say until he is done, so I know I can respond with, here's what I heard you say, and then offer up my response. And that kind of leads to tip number 3. When you're listening, communicate with your whole self. Both when you're listening and talking, make sure you're looking at each other. You don't have your phones while you're chatting about something. And if necessary, if it's really touchy, whatever you're talking about, make sure you're holding hands. Because, when we're in argument, if we're standing like this, or hands on our hips, or we're fisted, or we're like, just our posture can affect how we say something, and words are only part of communicating. I think I heard a stat that it's like 7% of how we communicate. I don't know if that's accurate, but if we were to put a percentage to it, it still doesn't change the fact that words are only part of how you communicate. Because my husband sometimes says, fine, I'm sorry. He may have said he's sorry, but it is not making me feel better. It might make me feel worse because his tone of voice tells me he's not sorry and he just wants me to shut up. So words, tone of voice, body posture, facial expressions, even the timing of which we say something, all of this matters. And that means there's not a lot of room to make mistakes, and it means we are going to make a lot of them. So, let me correct what I just said. There's not a lot of room to not make mistakes. So we're going to make a lot of them. That's what I'm trying to say. When there's so much you're thinking about to communicate well, you're going to probably mess up a lot. And that means you need to be able to apologize and be the bigger person. That's another cliche thing, but you really do. Sometimes you have to just go back to your spouse after you've had this blow up and say, I'm so sorry. I really had a bad day. I'm feeling this way, and I didn't realize you felt this way. I didn't know you were trying to say this or whatever. And that's another thing I'll give you a free tip for, just because it kind of relates to this. Warn your spouse if you woke up on the wrong side of the bed and you're just feeling down, even if it's for no placeable reason. For women, that happens to us a lot. Warn your spouse and say, you know what, I'm kind of in a weird mood, so if I overreact with you, just have grace with me. And that will help them when you do blow up with them and you feel like you have to justify it, you feel like it's going to turn into a fight. They'll hopefully realize, oh yeah, she's having a bad morning, how can I help her? Hopefully they'll have that servant mind when you do communicate badly for whatever reason. I hope these helped. I know that it can be hard to really work through things. This isn't premarital counseling, and this is not going to fix all of your communicating problems, but it's just something to keep in mind. You know what works best for your spouse and for you, and some of these tips may not work for you. Maybe you have to resolve things before the sun sets. It's just easier that way. But if things arise after the sun sets, know that you can work it out that night if it's better, or you can wait until the morning. There's nothing wrong about that. I hope that you enjoyed this. If you have any questions, leave them below or comments, and I look forward to next time. And feel free to let me know something you want me to address for the next video, and I will happily think about it, pray about it, and make it as short and sweet as possible, and hopefully helpful for you. Thank you for listening, and talk to you soon.